Snow fell in slow, endless waves across the valley, each flake glowing faintly under the yellow porch light. Inside the backyard, a little girl no older than 7 trembled in the biting cold, her thin pajamas soaked through. Her name was Elsie. Her stepmother, Veronica, stood above her in a fur coat, her eyes colder than the snow. Without a word, she shoved the child toward a rusted dog cage, slammed the latch, and poured a bucket of icy water straight over her head. "Animals stay outside," Veronica hissed. "You'll learn where you belong." Elsie gasped, clutching the small silver necklace around her neck, the last thing her mother had given her before dying in an accident last year. Her lips trembled. Frost clung to her lashes. No one came to help. The only sound was the wind howling across the frozen field and the child's choked whisper. "I'll be good. I promise. Before we go any further, take a breath with me." Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? If your heart has ever felt cold or forgotten, you're not alone here. Sometimes we all need a reminder that kindness still exists, even in the cruelest storm. If your heart feels heavy, may this story bring you a little light. Now, let's begin. The storm thickened, blanketing the yard in white. Elsie's small fingers gripped the frozen bars until they burned red. Above her, the back door slammed shut, leaving the world silent except for the hiss of falling snow. Minutes turned to hours. The little girl curled up against the corner of the cage, her breath fogging the air, the necklace pressed tight to her chest like a promise she refused to let go. Then headlights. A black Bentley slowed on the icy road. Behind the wheel sat Adrian Cole, a man whose face was known in magazines, yet whose eyes carried the emptiness of a broken past. He had once lost his daughter in a fire he couldn't prevent, and tonight, through the swirl of snow, he saw another child, small, barefoot, locked in a cage. The car screeched to a halt. Adrian stepped into the snow, the wind biting his face. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He reached for the latch, his hands shaking, and opened the cage. His coat slipped from his shoulders and over the little girl like a shelter of warmth and justice. "Not tonight," he whispered. "She's not an animal." The child blinked up at him, her lashes glittering with tears and snow. And for the first time that night, the world felt a little less cold. The night after the rescue, the storm eased, leaving behind a silence that felt almost sacred. Through the frosted window of his mountain cabin, Adrian Cole watched the world turn white. Beside the fireplace, wrapped in a thick blanket, Elsie sat quietly, her small hands resting on a cup of cocoa that had long gone cold. She didn't drink it. She just held it as if warmth itself might slip away if she let go. Her hair was still damp, her eyes wide and hollow, tracking the dance of snow outside the glass. The silver necklace around her neck caught the firelight every few seconds, flashing like a heartbeat. Adrian noticed how she touched it whenever the wind howled like a ritual of protection. He spoke softly, almost afraid to break the fragile calm. "Does it hurt anywhere?" Elsie shook her head. Then after a pause, she whispered, "I was scared the snow would bury me before anyone found me." Her words struck like a blade wrapped in innocence. Adrian looked away, his throat tightening. He had heard the same tone once before from his own daughter, before the fire took her. Morning came pale and cold. Adrian lit the fireplace again, the smell of pine wood filling the cabin. Elsie wandered around timidly, stopping at a framed photo on the mantel. A smiling little girl with curly brown hair. "Is that your daughter?" she asked. He nodded slowly. Her name was Grace. Elsie's voice barely carried through the air. She's pretty. Adrian smiled, but it was the kind that hurt more than it healed. She loved the snow too. Elsie turned back toward the window. Outside, the mountains stretched into the distance, all white and endless. For a moment she pressed her palm to the cold glass, her breath fogging a tiny circle. Then she traced the letter E in it, the same letter engraved on her necklace. Hours passed in quiet. Adrian worked at his desk, pretending to focus, but his eyes kept drifting to the little figure curled up by the fire. Every so often she would hum softly to herself, a tune broken and unsure, as if half remembered from happier times. Once, when the wind moaned through the chimney, she flinched and drew her knees tighter. Without thinking, Adrian set down his pen and walked over, gently adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. She looked up, surprised, and for a moment her eyes reflected the firelight, small, fragile, but alive. The snow kept falling thick and gentle, wrapping the world in white forgiveness. But inside Adrian's chest, guilt and tenderness collided. He wondered if saving her was an act of redemption or the universe's way of giving him a second chance. Elsie finally spoke again, voice faint like the crackle of the fire. My mum said, snow means angels are walking. Adrian looked at her, his heart tightening. Outside the cabin, snowflakes drifted past the window, each one melting softly against the warmth of the glass. For the first time in years, he whispered to himself, then maybe they finally found us. The next evening, the snow still whispered across the cabin roof like soft fingers on glass. Adrian sat on the couch, a half-open file resting on his knees, paperwork he hadn't touched in hours. Across from him, Elsie sat near the fire, clutching the small silver necklace in her hands, rubbing the pendant between her thumbs as if it might disappear. The silence between them wasn't heavy, just careful, like both were afraid to speak too loud and wake the ghosts that still lingered in the room. A knock came from the door. It was Mrs. Lorne, the elderly neighbour who had helped Adrian for years. She stepped inside, shaking snow from her coat. Good heavens, you really found her out there. Her eyes softened when they met Elsie's. You poor thing. Adrian nodded. I'll need your help, Mrs. Lorne. I don't know the procedures for temporary custody yet. The old woman glanced at the child again, her voice low. Then you'd better hurry before someone claims her back for the wrong reasons. Her words hung in the air like frost. Adrian knew exactly what she meant. The cruel stepmother would not let go easily. After Mrs. Lorne left, the fire crackled louder, throwing golden light across the walls. Adrian crouched beside the hearth, where Elsie sat cross-legged, her small toes hidden beneath the hem of his wool blanket. Elsie, he began softly, you don't have to be afraid anymore. You're safe here. She hesitated, eyes darting to the door. Are you going to send me back? Adrian froze. For a second, he saw Grace's face, the same question, the same fear. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. No, not now, not ever. Elsie's eyes shimmered. People say that then they leave. Her voice cracked on the last word. Adrian reached out slowly and placed his hand over hers, feeling the tiny pulse beneath her skin. Then let me be the first to prove them wrong, he said. No one is leaving you. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees, but the sound felt distant now. The fire burned brighter, painting their faces in shades of amber. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The man who had lost a daughter and the child who had lost her world sitting together in quiet promise. Adrian rose, fetched his own thick coat from the rack and draped it around her shoulders. The fabric nearly swallowed her whole. "It's heavy," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "That's how warmth works. It has weight." Elsie looked up at him, her small voice barely audible. "Then I'll keep it forever." And Adrian whispered back, "That's the idea." Miles away from Adrian's cabin, the town lights of Aspen Ridge glimmered beneath the same winter sky. In a glass-walled mansion perched on a hill, Veronica Hale poured herself another glass of wine. The ruby liquid swirled under the chandelier light as she smiled faintly at her reflection in the window. "Poor little Elsie," she murmured, always trying to look innocent. Her smile sharpened. Across the room, a television screen replayed the local evening news. Wealthy investor Adrian Cole rescues a young girl from the cold community, praises act of kindness. The anchor's voice praised him. The photo showed Adrian wrapping his coat around the trembling child. Veronica's fingers tightened on the stem of her glass until it cracked. "He took what was mine." She set the glass down, shards glittering on the marble counter. From a nearby desk, she picked up a set of documents, her late husband's estate, the inheritance Elsie's mother had left behind. If the girl stayed missing or was declared unfit for custody, everything would transfer to her. And now, thanks to Adrian Cole, that plan was slipping away. The doorbell rang. A tall man stepped in, removing his gloves. Victor Lang, an attorney known for taking uncomfortable cases with the right incentive. He placed his briefcase on the table. "Mrs. Hale," he said smoothly, "I received your message. I assume it's about the child." Veronica leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. "She's alive. Unfortunately, that man Cole has her. I want her back. Quietly, legally, if possible." Victor adjusted his glasses, smirking. "And if not legally," Veronica's gaze hardened, "then I want her credibility destroyed. He wants to play the hero fine. Let's make the world doubt his halo." Victor opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I can arrange a narrative press leaks questions about his motives. A story that paints him as a man seeking pity after losing his daughter. People love tragedy. They just hate when it looks convenient." Veronica smiled, her lipstick glinting like blood. "Good. Make it believable. I'll handle the rest." She walked toward a photo on the wall, her late husband and Elsie's mother smiling together years ago, before everything turned cold. With a single swipe, Veronica tore the photo from its frame, the sound sharp as a blade through silk. For a moment, she stared at the torn faces, her own reflection caught between them in the cracked glass. "You had everything, and still you pitied that girl," she whispered to the image. "Let's see if she survives kindness." Her phone buzzed. She picked it up, her voice turning velvet smooth. "Yes, Ortega. I'll triple the payment. Find me anything that can make Adrian Cole look unfit to raise a child." She ended the call and turned back to the window. Outside the mansion, snow fell quietly over the hill, soft and soundless, as if even the sky was afraid to make noise near her. 3 days later, the snow in the mountains began to melt, leaving the air damp and heavy with fog. Inside the cabin, Adrian sat at the kitchen table, papers and phone calls scattered before him. He had spent the past 48 hours filing emergency custody paperwork, talking to social services and barely sleeping. Elsie sat nearby on the floor, drawing on a torn piece of cardboard with an old pencil he'd found in a drawer. Each line she drew was careful, slow, and when she finished, she turned the sketch toward him. "It's my old house," she said softly. "The one with the red roof." Adrian smiled faintly. The drawing showed more than a house. It showed bars in the back, like a cage. He forced his voice to stay calm. "You drew it perfectly, sweetheart." Elsie blinked, uncertain whether it was praise or pity. Then she lifted the silver necklace from her chest. "My mum gave me this when she was sick," she said. "She said it would protect me." Adrian noticed something strange. The pendant wasn't just a heart. It had a tiny seam along the edge. He reached for a magnifying glass from his desk. "May I?" The girl nodded. When he twisted the pendant gently, a click sounded. A small metallic piece popped loose, a micro key no longer than his thumbnail. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "It was always there," Elsie murmured, "but the lady, the bad one, told me never to open it." Adrian's pulse quickened. He rose, walked to his old safe, and tried the key. It didn't fit. Something about the weight of it reminded him of a memory. Elsie's mother used to work in her husband's law office before she died. Could she have hidden something? He called Nora Jacobs, his friend, an attorney, a woman in her mid-30s, sharp-eyed and calm under pressure. Within an hour she arrived, shaking snow from her trench coat. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. "I haven't," Adrian replied. "But this might explain everything." He handed her the pendant and the key. Nora examined it, frowning. "Looks like a drive key for an encrypted flash device. Where did you find it?" Adrian nodded toward Elsie, who sat hugging her knees by the fire. "Her necklace. From her mother." Nora's gaze softened. Then her mother might have left something behind. "Let's check the probate files. If we're lucky, her father's old law office still keeps backups." They drove into town as dusk fell, snow swirling again, like ghosts refusing to rest. Inside the closed office, dust floated in the light of Adrian's flashlight. Nora rummaged through old drawers until she found a wooden box labeled personal. Private. She inserted the key into a tiny metal lock. It fit perfectly. The lid opened with a faint creak. Inside lay a small flash drive wrapped in tissue paper and a folded letter. The handwriting was delicate. Elsie's mother's name, Margaret Hale. Adrian's hands trembled as he unfolded the paper. "If you are reading this, I have failed to protect her. The man I married is not the same. If anything happens to me, keep this proof safe. It will show who planned it all." Nora inserted the flash drive into her laptop. A video flickered onto the screen, grainy but clear enough to show Veronica and Victor Lang seated at a dining table discussing money. "Once the girl's custody is gone," Veronica said, "we move the assets into my name. Make sure the report says she's unstable. No one will believe a child." Adrian's jaw tightened. His hand clenched into a fist. Beside him, Nora exhaled slowly. "This is enough to reopen the estate case. Maybe even criminal charges." He stared at the screen, his reflection trembling in the glow. Then, it's time someone finally believed her. Outside, the wind howled across the empty streets, carrying flakes of snow past the window like tiny white witnesses. By the next morning, the video had already found its way to the police and child services through Nora's submission. But Veronica was faster. Within hours, every major outlet in Aspen Ridge was buzzing with headlines. Millionaire Adrian Cole, fallen hero, or opportunist mysterious girl, rescued by investor. A PR stunt gone wrong. Adrian stood in the kitchen, the newspaper trembling in his hand. The ink smelled of smoke and betrayal. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing clients, reporters, even former friends asking if it was true. "She's turning the narrative," Nora said through the phone. "She's using her connections to frame you as emotionally unstable. I've seen this tactic before." Adrian paced across the room, his voice low. "They're trying to make it look like I kidnapped her." "That's exactly what it is," Nora replied. "We'll file a counterclaim, but you need to stay calm for the girl's sake." Across the living room, Elsie sat on the couch, her legs tucked under the blanket, the TV flashing with headlines she didn't understand but could feel. The image of her stepmother appeared on screen, Veronica dressed in black tears, glistening as she faced the camera. "I only want my stepdaughter back," Veronica said, voice trembling perfectly. "Mr. Cole means well, but grief can make people unstable." The reporter's voice softened, sympathetic. Adrian felt the blood rush to his head. He turned off the TV, his voice trembling with restrained rage. "She's lying to the world." Elsie flinched at his tone. He stopped immediately, crouched beside her, and took her hand. "Hey, not you. Never you." Her eyes filled with tears. "If they take me back, she'll lock me again." He squeezed her hand tighter. "No one's taking you anywhere." That evening, headlights flashed outside the cabin, 2 black SUVs parked in the snow. Adrian opened the door to find 2 social workers and a uniformed officer standing in the cold. "Mr. Cole, we received a report regarding the child's safety," one of them said gently. "We'll need to conduct a welfare check." Adrian stepped aside, heart hammering. Elsie hid behind the couch, trembling. When the officer knelt and tried to speak to her, she only whispered, "Please don't make me go back." The woman from Child Services looked uncertain. Adrian showed them the video Nora had uncovered, the papers, the letter from Elsie's mother. Minutes passed in tense silence as they reviewed the files. Finally, the officer cleared his throat. "We'll file this under temporary protection. No removal tonight." When the door finally closed, Adrian let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Snow lashed against the windows like claws. He turned to Elsie, who was still clutching the blanket like armor. "You're safe tonight," he said. "But tomorrow, we fight back." Later, as the cabin grew quiet again, Adrian sat alone by the window. Through the glass, he could see the reflection of himself, tired eyes, trembling hands, and behind him the faint glow of the fireplace. He whispered to the snow outside, as if speaking to the memory of his daughter. "Grace, help me protect her. I won't fail again." The storm outside roared louder, but in that vow there was something unbreakable, the moment a wounded man became a guardian. The courthouse in Aspen Ridge looked almost surreal that morning, its white stone steps buried beneath layers of fresh snow, the sky low and grey like a held breath. Inside, cameras flashed as Adrian Cole entered with Nora Jacobs at his side. Beside them walked a small figure in a pale blue coat, Elsie, her silver necklace gleaming faintly under the lights. Reporters crowded the hallway microphones like bayonets. "Mr. Cole, is it true you faked the rescue for publicity, sir? Are you emotionally stable enough to care for a child?" Adrian said nothing. He only placed a steady hand on Elsie's shoulder, guiding her through the noise until the courtroom doors shut behind them and the world outside vanished. At the plaintiff's table sat Veronica Hale, dressed in black velvet, her expression a perfect sculpture of sorrow. Beside her, Victor Lang adjusted his tie, already rehearsing his lines for the cameras waiting beyond. When the judge entered, the room fell into silence except for the soft patter of snow hitting the windows. This court convenes to determine custody of minor Elsie Hale, the judge announced. Mr. Cole, you may proceed. Nora rose. Her voice was calm, but edged with steel. Your Honor, we present evidence of abuse and conspiracy to defraud the estate of the late Richard Hale. The victim's stepmother, Mrs. Hale, intentionally endangered the child to gain control of the assets. Victor stood at once, feigning outrage. Objection, speculation, and slander. My client has been nothing but a grieving widow. Nora clicked the remote, and the courtroom projector came to life. The grainy video played the same one Adrian and she had uncovered. Veronica's voice filled the room. Once the girl's custody is gone, move the assets into my name. No one will believe a child. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Veronica's jaw tightened, her hands clenching the edge of the table. Victor tried to object again, but the judge raised a hand for silence. Then, from the witness room, Elsie stepped forward. She was small against the towering walls, her breath trembling as she faced the judge. I don't want money, she said softly. I just don't want to sleep in the cage again. The words broke through the silence like a hammer through glass. Several jurors wiped their eyes. Veronica looked away, her face cracking under the weight of something too human shame or fury, no one could tell. Adrian's throat tightened. He wanted to rush forward to hold her, but he knew he couldn't. He stood perfectly still, his hands clasped, letting the child's voice speak for them both. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Cole, what compels you to take responsibility for a child, not your own? Adrian met the judge's gaze, his voice quiet but unwavering. Because someone should have. Because when I lost my daughter, I promised I'd never look away again. For a moment, the courtroom was utterly silent, except for the whisper of snow against the glass. The judge's expression softened. This court finds temporary guardianship to Mr. Cole pending formal adoption review. A separate investigation into Mrs. Hale's conduct will proceed immediately. Gasps filled the room. Veronica's face went pale. Victor whispered urgently to her, but she stood frozen, staring at Adrian and the girl as if seeing ghosts. Outside, as the doors opened, a gust of cold air swept through the hall. Snowflakes spiraled around them, bright, silent, and free. Reporters shouted questions, but Adrian ignored them all. He bent down to Elsie's level. You did brave today, he said softly. Does this mean we can go home? Adrian smiled, a tear slipping down his cheek. Yes, Elsie. It means you'll never have to be cold again. And together they stepped out into the falling snow, the world still grey, but the light beginning to break through. The trial ended just before dusk. By the time Adrian and Elsie stepped outside, the courthouse steps were blanketed in snow so soft it muffled every sound. Photographers had already gone home, leaving only a few dim streetlights, and the echo of the judge's final words lingering in the air, custody granted. Investigation pending. Justice to be served. Adrian stood at the curb, his breath forming pale clouds in the cold. Beside him, Elsie looked up at the darkening sky, her cheeks pink from the chill. Snowflakes gathered in her hair like tiny pearls of mercy. It's over, right? She asked, her voice small. Adrian knelt beside her. Almost little one, but she won't hurt you again. She nodded, but her eyes still carried the echo of years she'd never speak of. He reached out and gently brushed the snow from her coat, then took her hand. Come on, let's go home. 2 weeks later, the headlines changed. Stepmother charged with fraud and child endangerment. Veronica Hale's photograph appeared beneath the words, her once perfect expression twisted with exhaustion and disbelief. Her lawyer, Victor Lang, had confessed under pressure, turning over records that proved every lie. The world that once adored Veronica's charm now turned its eyes away. Inside Adrian's cabin, the world was smaller, quieter, but finally safe. The fireplace crackled a steady heartbeat of warmth. Elsie sat at the coffee table with crayons scattered across the wood, drawing again. This time she wasn't drawing cages or storms. She was drawing a home, a cabin with a smoking chimney and two figures by the window, one tall, one small, both smiling. Adrian looked at the picture, his chest tightening. "That's us." She nodded. "You and me, and the snow that keeps us safe." He smiled softly, his hand brushing her hair. "I think Grace would have liked that." "Who's Grace?" "My daughter," he said quietly. "She's the reason I stopped believing in miracles. And you're the reason I started again." That night, as the snow fell silently outside, Adrian placed a single lamp in the window, a warm golden glow against the winter dark. Elsie climbed onto the couch, wrapped in his coat, her silver necklace glinting in the light. She looked toward the lamp. "It looks like it's calling someone home." Adrian smiled. "Maybe it is." They sat in silence, watching the snow drift past the glass until the clock chimed midnight. Outside, the world was frozen, but inside that small cabin there was warmth enough for two hearts, and for one ghost finally at peace. 1 year later, winter came again to the mountains of Colorado. Snow fell softly over the valley, covering the world in white silence. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke. Laughter drifted from the kitchen, small and bright. Elsie, now taller by an inch and steadier in her smile, stood on a stool, stirring hot chocolate, her cheeks glowing from the fire. A photo frame sat on the shelf beside her drawing from months ago. The same little house, the same two figures now real. Adrian Cole stepped in from outside, brushing snow from his coat. He looked older, maybe, but lighter. The grief that once haunted his eyes had softened into something gentler acceptance. "Careful, chef," he teased. "You're spilling more marshmallows than cocoa." Elsie giggled. "You always say that." He set 2 mugs on the table and lit the lamp by the window. The same lamp they'd lit every night since the trial. Its golden glow spilled across the room, chasing every shadow away. They sat together in quiet, watching the snow fall through the window. Elsie leaned against him, holding the silver necklace between her fingers. "Mom used to say snow means angels are walking," she whispered. Adrian looked out at the endless white. "Then they must be close tonight." The fire cracked softly. Elsie smiled, eyes half closed. No more dark. Adrian brushed a strand of hair from her face, his voice steady, full of warmth. "No more dark, sweetheart. Only light." Outside, the snow kept falling, but this time it felt like peace. In the moment of pain, like little Elsie, or in the quiet strength of someone who dares to protect like Adrian. Have you ever witnessed kindness arrive just in time? A stranger's hand, a word that stopped the storm for you even for a second. If you had an Elsie near you, someone small, scared, or forgotten, what would you do today to ease her fear? Tell us your thoughts below, because even a single line from you could be the light guiding someone who feels lost tonight. and I want to check in with you. How have you been lately? Did this story make your heart ache a little or bring a tear that you didn't expect? If your day feels heavy, I hope this ending leaves you with a touch of warmth, a reminder that no winter lasts forever. Our channel will always be here to listen, to share, and to remind you that kindness still exists even in the coldest season. So please leave a comment, share this video, and help us keep telling stories that heal, stories that whisper that at the end of every dark road, the light is always waiting.